Okay, so on to part two. So we drive Grandma home. By this time, it's about 9:30 at night. She's in agony, and we get her to her house, and there's a couple of steps to get her up into her kitchen. And when she was so weak. She was almost losing consciousness. She was so weak, and three of us had to try and carry her in. My mom and my grandma both have back injuries, so they were kind of on either side of her. It was doing a tremendous amount of damage to them as well. And then I was under her, and I mean, she was like literally like dead weight. It was just, I mean, she's tiny. She's only like 100 pounds, but still, like 100 pounds of dead weight up a set of stairs and into a house. And you've got to be careful about where you touch this person because she's so frail, and she has a broken shoulder. So where am I going to hold her? Like, I'm holding her under here. And she kept saying, I'm falling. And we realized now, like after the fact, that she wasn't actually falling. She had this sensation that she was falling because once we got her into the house, we got her into her little wheelchair that she has, and she sat there and she kept saying, I can't breathe. And so she was just like kind of like bobbing her head, and of course she was tired, but it was more than that. And so we took her blood pressure, and her blood pressure was super low. It was like 82/45, and in that range. It even went to like 79/44, super low. And so we're like, oh my God, we can't keep her home like this. We've got to, she's got to go back to the hospital. And at this point, there's no way that we're bringing her back to that same hospital. So we can't call for an ambulance because the ambulance that services us only goes to that hospital. We have to drive her ourselves. And then next hospital is another half an hour beyond the first hospital. So we get into two separate cars. We had to call my daughter over with two of her friends, guy friends who, young, big guys who they carried her out of the house in her wheelchair and then got her to the car, and one of them picked her up almost like a baby and put her in the car. And shout out to those guys. Shout out to Eric and Henry. Thank you guys. And my daughter Mackenzie. Super good young kids. 20-somethings. Anyway, back to the hospital we go. Now this time we have to drive all the way to Riverhead, which is an hour and a half away. So we finally get to the other hospital, and the difference in the treatment that we got there was night and day. First of all, and we told them everything that happened. We'd been to the previous hospital. They were shocked that they hadn't done any sort of an EKG or a head scan on my grandmother because she was on blood thinners. She did hit her head. She was in bad shape, and they got us right in. They gave all three of us, me, my mom, and my aunt, visitor passes so that we could go in with her. The room that she was in was no different than the one that she was in at Southampton Hospital. It was basically they're like private stalls. They're basically little private rooms, but in the emergency room, small, but it's comforting for a patient, especially an old patient, any patient, to have their family members there. So, yeah, they very kindly let us all be in there. And they began doing so many tests on my grandmother. First of all, they got an IV in her. They tried to get an IV in her. They couldn't. They tried to get some blood. They did get a little bit of blood, but because it flowed so slowly, she's so frail, they couldn't do it. Then they tried to set it with an ultrasound. Ultimately, they ended up having to put it in her neck because that's the only place where she had a viable vein that they could quickly get the blood from for testing. This was over the course of a long period of time. They did CAT scans. They did EKGs. They set her up with pain meds. The other hospital gave her 3 Tylenols and sent her on her way. They put her, they got the IV in her, they got pain meds going in her, and treated her and us with so much more dignity and respect. They treated her like a person, not just an old. At Southampton Hospital, all of us, even my grandmother, got this feeling that they were just, they didn't want to deal with an old lady. They didn't want to deal with someone who was almost 100. They didn't want to deal with someone who was so frail. And that was the feeling that we got. What the real story was, I really don't know yet. At Peconic Bay Medical Center, though, it was a whole separate, different story. They spoke to us all with respect. They got the clearance they needed to speak with all of us. All 3 of us were put on her care proxy and her emergency contact and their contact list. And they were kind. And they were not going to leave any stone unturned. It didn't matter that she was 99. It didn't matter that maybe she might not have a long time to live. They were there to provide her with care and dignity. And they did, and they are. She is still there because she was not able to be released. She's still under observation. She did have elevated heart enzymes, which does indicate there was some sort of a heart event that went on. She still is not, her blood pressure has stabilized, but still keeps dipping low, so she still is not, she's still big fall risk. So they know they can't release her. They can't release her without knowing that she's not going to a safe environment, and we can't provide that for her right now. So also the orthopedic surgeon is trying to figure out how to deal with fixing her shoulder, because clearly it needs to be fixed, but because she is such a delicate individual, it is going to be a challenge. So my grandma is over 24 hours now still in the hospital, or remains in the hospital. And that was our story. I have to work several shifts over the next, beginning tomorrow. I've got 5 shifts in a row. And so I was starting to panic when we got to, I'm rocking back and forth because my back hurts, because my back is painful from the whole, it was a long 24 hours. But anyway, around 5 a.m., I decided to leave this morning because it was clear that they were getting to a point where they were going to admit her, and there was nothing more I could do. And I needed to get some sleep because I've got work coming up. So I came home. I got home 5:30 this morning, fed the cats, the dogs, and then took some sleeping meds and tried to get some sleep. I got 3 hours of sleep, and then kind of just zombied today, just waiting and for updates from my grandma, my mom, and my Aunt Janice. I feel terrible for her. They're both, older than me, and both have had back issues, and so they're also in really pretty tough shape right now. So say prayers for everyone. Have a great night.